When Love Conquers All, a Priscilla and Elvis story. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, Priscilla could see him, the king of rock and roll, reduced to a broken man, sobbing into his hands. Elvis Presley, who had commanded stages before millions, now sat trembling on the marble floor of their Graceland bathroom, completely shattered. The pills scattered around him told only part of the story. The real tragedy was in his eyes, the look of a man who had everything, yet felt he had nothing left to live for. But Priscilla didn't see a fallen idol that night. She saw the scared young man she fell in love with, and she knew that what happened in the next few minutes would either save their marriage or destroy it forever. What she chose to do would shock everyone who thought they knew the real story of Elvis and Priscilla Presley. The year was 1973, and Graceland had never felt more like a prison than a palace. Priscilla moved through the hallways with practiced silence, her heels clicking softly against the marble floors as she made her way upstairs. The house was eerily quiet, too quiet for a home that usually buzzed with the constant activity of staff, musicians, and hangers-on who orbited around Elvis like satellites around the sun. She had been looking for him for over an hour. The last time anyone had seen Elvis, he had been in his study, poring over contracts and correspondence that seemed to drain the life from him with each passing day. Colonel Parker had been pushing him harder than ever, booking more shows, demanding more appearances, treating him less like a human being and more like a money-making machine. The toll was becoming increasingly visible, not just in Elvis's physical appearance, but in the growing distance between them. Their marriage had been under strain for months. The constant touring, the pills that Elvis claimed he needed to perform, the parade of people who surrounded him with their own agendas, it all created a wall between them that seemed to grow higher each day. Priscilla had tried everything she could think of to reach him, but Elvis had become a master at wearing masks. Even in his own home dot, as she approached the master bedroom, she noticed a thin strip of light coming from beneath the bathroom door. She paused, listening carefully. At first, there was only silence, but then she heard a sound that made her heart stop. It was quiet sobbing, the kind of deep, soul-wrenching crying that comes from a place of complete despair. Priscilla's hand trembled as she reached for the door handle. She had seen Elvis in many states over the years, euphoric after a great performance, frustrated with the business side of his career, exhausted from the demands of fame, but she had never heard him cry like this. The sound was raw and broken, stripped of all the bravado and confidence that defined his public persona. When she gently pushed the door open, the sight that greeted her would be burned into her memory forever. Elvis sat on the bathroom floor, still wearing the elaborate jumpsuit from his last Vegas performance, but now it looked more like a costume from a play that had ended badly. His famous hair was disheveled, his makeup smeared, and scattered around him on the pristine white tiles were dozens of pill suppers, downers, painkillers, and others she couldn't identify. But it wasn't the pills that broke her heart. It was the look in his eyes when he finally noticed her standing there. For just a moment, all of his defenses dropped, and she saw past the king of rock and roll, past the movie star, past all the layers of fame and fortune, to the frightened young man from Tupelo who had never quite believed he deserved the extraordinary life he had been given. "Priscilla," he whispered, his voice hoarse from crying, "I don't know who I am anymore." Priscilla stood frozen in the doorway for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only seconds. Every instinct told her to either run to him or run away entirely. This wasn't the Elvis the world knew, the confident performer who could command an audience of thousands with just a smile. This was a man completely stripped bare, vulnerable in a way that was both heartbreaking and terrifying. She could have called for help. Dr. Nick was on speed dial, always ready to rush over with whatever combination of medications he thought might solve the immediate crisis. She could have summoned any number of the people who claimed to care about Elvis's well-being. Instead, she did something that surprised even herself. She stepped into the bathroom, closed the door behind her, and sat down on the floor next to him. The pills crunched softly under her dress as she settled beside him, but she didn't care about the expensive fabric or the mess. All that mattered was the broken man next to her who was struggling to breathe between sobs. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Priscilla simply sat there, her presence a silent anchor in the storm of his despair. "I can't do this anymore." "Scylla," Elvis finally whispered, using the nickname he had given her when they first met. "I look in the mirror, and I don't recognize myself. I used to sing because I loved it, because it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Now it's just ... performance. Empty performance." Priscilla reached out and took his hand, noting how cold and clammy it felt. "When was the last time you ate a real meal?" she asked gently. "When was the last time you slept more than 2 hours?" "Straight?" Elvis laughed bitterly. "Sleep? I haven't really slept in months. Every time I close my eyes, I see all the things I've screwed up, all the people I've disappointed. The pills help for a while, but then—" he gestured helplessly at the scattered medication around them. "But then they make everything worse," Priscilla finished for him. She had been watching this slow-motion disaster for months, powerless to stop it as Elvis spiraled deeper into a dependency that was killing him by degrees. She had tried talking to him, tried confronting him, tried involving others who might have influence over him. Nothing had worked. Looking at him now, she realized that everything she had tried before had been an attempt to fix the symptoms without addressing the real disease. Elvis wasn't just addicted to pills, he was addicted to being someone other than himself. The fame that had given him everything had also taken away his sense of who he really was, underneath all the glitter and gold. "Do you remember," Priscilla said softly, "the first night we talked for hours at Graceland? You told me about your dreams, about wanting to be more than just an entertainer. You talked about wanting to make movies that mattered, about using your influence to help people, about finding someone who would love Elvis Aaron Presley, not just Elvis the performer." Elvis looked at her with eyes that held the faintest glimmer of recognition. "I remember. You were so young, but you saw right through all the rest. You made me feel like maybe I could be more than what everyone expected." "You can still be more," Priscilla said firmly. "But first, you have to decide if you want to live or if you want to keep dying slowly like this. Because that's what this is, Elvis. This isn't living. This is just ... existing from one performance to the next, one pill to the next, one crisis to the next." The silence that followed Priscilla's words seemed to stretch forever. Elvis stared at the pills scattered around them, then at his reflection in the mirror, across from where they sat. Priscilla could see him wrestling with himself, a part of him that wanted to change, fighting against the part that had become comfortable with the familiar rhythm of destruction. "I've tried to quit before," he said finally. "God knows I've tried. But the pressure, the expectations, the schedule that never stops. The pills are the only thing that make it bearable." Priscilla took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to propose would either save them or end everything. "Then we change all of it. Everything. The schedule, the people around you, the way you live, the way you work, everything." Elvis looked at her skeptically. "The Colonel will never agree to that. There are contracts, commitments, millions of dollars at stake." "I don't care about the Colonel," Priscilla said with a fierceness that surprised them both. "I don't care about the contracts or the money or any of it. I care about you, the real you. And if Colonel Parker and all the rest of them can't accept that you need to be a human being before you can be a performer, then maybe it's time to find new people to work with. For the first time in hours, Elvis looked directly at her, really. Looked at her, seeing not just his wife, but his partner, his ally in a world that had forgotten he was more than just a commodity. You would do that? You would help me fight all of them. I would do more than that, Priscilla replied. I'm going to call Dr. Nuck right now and tell him that you're checking into a real treatment facility, not some private clinic where they'll just switch you to different pills, but a place where they'll help you get clean completely. And while you're getting healthy, I'm going to start making changes here at Graceland. New staff, new management, new rules about who gets access to you and when. Elvis's eyes filled with tears again, but these were different from the despairing sobs she had found him with. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something that might have been hope. You think I can do it? You think I can get back to who I used to be? Priscilla squeezed his hand tighter. I think you can become someone even better. The Elvis I fell in love with was special, not because he was famous, but because he had a good heart and a desire to bring joy to people. Person is still in there, underneath all the pain and confusion. We just need to clear away everything that's been burying him. Elvis was quiet for a long moment, and Priscilla could see him making the mental calculations that had governed his life for so long, thinking about money, about image, about all the people whose livelihoods depended on his continued performance. But then something shifted in his expression, a decision crystallizing. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, let's do it. Let's change everything. He paused, looking around at the pills scattered on the floor. But I'm scared, Scylla. What if I can't perform without these? What if the music doesn't come back? What if all I really am is just ... this? Priscilla helped him to his feet, both of them careful not to step on the medication that represented so much pain and false promise. Then we'll find out together. But I'd rather have a sober Elvis, who never performs again, than lose you completely to this. As they stood together in that bathroom at Graceland, surrounded by the debris of Elvis's lowest moment, they made a pact that would reshape not just their marriage, but Elvis's entire approach to his life and career. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, fights with management, financial challenges, and moments when the old patterns would seem easier than the new path they were choosing. But in that moment, for the first time in years, both Elvis and Priscilla could see a future that looked like hope instead of just more of the same slow destruction. The next 6 months were the hardest of both their lives, but also the most honest. Elvis entered a treatment facility in Memphis under an assumed name, while Priscilla systematically dismantled the toxic ecosystem that had grown up around their life at Graceland. She fired staff members who had been enabling Elvis's drug use, installed new security protocols to keep dealers and hangers-on away from the property, and began the delicate process of renegotiating contracts with Colonel Parker and the various entertainment companies that had claims on Elvis's time and energy. The withdrawal was brutal. There were nights when Elvis called her from the facility, begging her to bring in something, anything to make the pain stop. There were days when he was so angry at her for forcing him into treatment that he refused to take her calls. But for every moment of darkness, there were small victories. The first night he slept without medication, the first day he ate a full meal, the first time he picked up his guitar, not because he had to perform, but because he wanted to make music. Priscilla faced her own challenges during this period. Friends and family members questioned whether she was being too harsh, whether she was asking too much of Elvis. The entertainment industry press began circulating rumors about problems in their marriage, about Elvis's health, about potential financial difficulties. Colonel Parker made several attempts to circumvent her new policies, bringing legal pressure and threatening to destroy Elvis's career if she didn't back down. But every time someone questioned her decisions or tried to pressure her into returning to the old ways, she remembered that night in the bathroom, the look of complete despair in Elvis's eyes, and the sound of his broken sobbing. No career, no amount of money, no public image was worth watching the person she loved destroy himself slowly. When Elvis finally came home from treatment, he was different, thinner, more fragile physically, but with a clarity in his eyes that she hadn't seen in years. The first thing he did was go to his music room and play guitar for 3 hours straight, not practicing for any performance or working on any particular song, but simply reconnecting with the joy of making music. "I had forgotten," he told her that night as they lay in bed together for the first time in months without the barrier of drugs between them. "I had forgotten that music was supposed to feel good. For so long, it was just work, just another thing I had to do to keep the machine running. But today, when I was playing, it felt like coming home." The changes at Graceland were visible to everyone who visited. The house felt lighter somehow, less like a fortress and more like a home. Elvis began writing again, collaborating with musicians who challenged him artistically rather than just telling him what they thought he wanted to hear. He started eating regular meals, exercising, and maintaining a schedule that allowed for rest and recovery between commitments. Most importantly, he and Priscilla rediscovered their partnership. Instead of the distance and miscommunication that had characterized their relationship during his worst period, they became allies working together toward common goals. They instituted a policy of complete honesty about everything: his temptations regarding drugs, her concerns about his career choices, their feelings about the pressures that fame brought into their lives. The entertainment industry was initially resistant to the new Elvis. Some critics complained that his performances lacked the manic energy they had come to expect. Some business associates grumbled about the new restrictions on his availability and the more selective approach to booking engagements. But audiences could sense the difference immediately. Here was an Elvis who was present, connected, authentic in a way he hadn't been in years. The music came from a real place again, and that realness translated into performances that were more powerful than anything he had done during his pill-fueled years. 6 months after that night in the bathroom, Elvis and Priscilla stood together on the stage of the International Hotel in Las Vegas, where he was performing his first concert since completing treatment. Before he began his set, he took the microphone and did something unprecedented. He talked honestly about his struggles, about hitting bottom, and about the woman who had saved his life by refusing to enable his destruction. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice strong and clear, "I want to tell you about the bravest person I know. My wife, Priscilla, could have taken the easy road. She could have just gone along with everything, pretended that everything was fine. Let me continue on the path I was on. Instead, she loved me enough to fight for me, even when I was too sick to fight for myself. This show tonight, this music, this life I'm living, none of it would be possible without her courage." The story of that night in the Graceland bathroom became a turning point, not just for Elvis and Priscilla's marriage, but for how they approached every aspect of their lives together. It taught them that real love isn't about accepting destructive behavior or enabling someone's worst impulses. It's about having the courage to fight for the best version of the person you love, even when that fight is difficult and uncertain. Their marriage didn't just survive. It thrived in ways that surprised everyone who had written them off. By choosing honesty over image management, authentic connection over superficial harmony, and long-term health over short-term comfort, they created a partnership that could weather the unique storms that come with fame and success. The lesson they learned that night is sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything you think you want in order to gain everything you actually need, is one that applies far beyond the world of entertainment royalty. Ready to transform your own relationships and find the courage to fight for what really matters? Click here to discover the principles that can help you build love that truly conquers all.